Like it feels good when people look at me on the street and like they don't really necessarily know what I am. Like I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that uncertainty in them because that's kind of what I want to convey. I want to convey to them that they should be questioning something, that it's not
Mm.
just two genders, and that they should be more aware of their surroundings and more aware of the people in their surroundings. Because
Mm.
I definitely think a little bit of awareness could go a long way to the right person.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. If you like what we do and want to make a contribution, you can become a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. Now, join us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I am a cis queer woman, and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with Victor Martinez. Victor's pronouns are they, them, and they are non binary and transgender, as well as pansexual and panromantic. Find out what that means to Victor in this episode. We also talk about identifying versus being, the freedom in expressing yourself, that clothes have no gender, connection to culture, having an awareness of your own mental health, processing out loud, and how gender expression is for yourself rather than others. It was recorded on the 14th of August 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
It's Victor Martinez.
Hello, Victor. And tell me about your gender experience and what language you use about it.
I use I am non-binary opposed to I identify as non-binary.
Mhm.
And I used to use I identify as, but that slowly changed as I kind of felt more comfortable with my gender and felt like I truly do identify and am non-binary. I feel like I used identify as when I was more unsure of what I
Right.
like was, and it it
Mhm.
it made it so that if I told people that I identify as such and I myself was unsure, it made it so that I wasn't like lying to them about it, I guess.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
until it kind of just felt more comfortable for me, and
hmm
then I just went by, I am non-binary.
hmm hmm
I definitely feel like that using I identify as a lot of people still do, even if they're
hmm
like sure of their gender, which is
Yeah.
totally fine.
hmm
It's just more so using it to start out. I feel like it helped a lot of people really get that I am sort of sense, because when some people hear like how do you identify, it makes them feel like this is how they identify opposed to how they are. Yeah, like I am non-binary opposed to identify as non-binary.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that Evie said as well, actually, which we just talked about. And she said it's like if I say I identify as, that means I can stop identifying as, and it's
Uh-huh.
not
Yeah, yeah.
like that. It's not that simple. It
Exactly. Yeah,
doesn't
that
work
that's
that way.
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's not like something you just like stopping identifying as. That's why it's like in a start, like if you're starting to explore your gender a lot more, then it makes it so you have that wiggle room to like be okay, well, maybe this doesn't feel right. Maybe I might identify as something else until you're sure of it. And then you can like surely say that you are this. At least
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah.
So
And
what? Yeah, go on.
Oh, no, oh, I was gonna say, and I also identify as transgender as well, but I am transgender. I don't. I just say I identify as because that's the lingo I'm used to. Just
Yeah. Do
yeah,
you
that's
find people respond differently to different language?
yeah, they definitely do. I would say most time when people ask me how, well, most people that I've had ask me like about my gender, they don't usually ask me how I identify. They usually ask what to call me, which I find a lot
Mm,
more comfortable because it leaves that
okay.
really, it's a very open-ended question, because I could
Mm,
really tell them however I would prefer them to call me opposed to what I
mhm.
identify as.
Yeah, because in a way that's almost like outing a person, and it's
Yeah.
kind of and you don't know Well, for one, it's a bit invasive. It's a bit too much, it's like a
Yeah,
step too
yeah.
far, isn't it? Yeah,
It is sometimes, definitely,
yeah,
especially if it really catches you off guard, because it's not like
yeah,
it's just a question that's like sometimes sprung on you just in random public setting, and it's like hard to answer right on the spot. So
yeah, I bet. So, what do you feel is the best way for people to, I don't know, ask you that? It's like, do you like it when people just say, "Hey, I'm so and so. My pronouns are this. How do I refer to you?" Or, I don't know. What do you feel is a good way to approach a person that way?
um I would say a good way to approach somebody is really just get to know them outside of their gender. Like,
Mm,
because you could know so much about a person besides their gender. Like, a name is a good thing. Like, just knowing
mm,
somebody's name is a huge window into who they are. And you could
mm,
really learn a lot more through just that interaction. Like,
mm,
I recently went on an outing into the forest with a bunch of my friends, and
yeah.
we invited a new friend along, and I didn't know her like at all.
Mm,
And we just talked, and we talked with name, and gender wasn't brought up the whole day, and it was fine. Like, we were getting along great, and it
yeah.
really didn't play a part into anything, really.
Mm, mm-hmm,
So sometimes not asking is good, because eventually you could come to the realization after knowing someone for a while. But I would
mm-hmm,
say if you're really curious about somebody's gender, that it would be helpful to ask, like, how do I refer to you? I would say
mm-hmm.
that's not as intrusive, and the person that you're asking could give you whichever answer they are comfortable with at the time with said person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, yeah, I
Hmm.
like that. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem.
yeah. So, what does being non-binary mean to you?
For me, it's really like a sense of like freedom. It
Mm,
really, for me, it made me feel like I had a lot more freedom over making my own choices. Like,
mm-hmm,
I could say definitely that I am non-binary, opposed to, being because I was born and assigned male at birth. So like, I didn't
mm-hmm,
have a choice in that matter.
mm-hmm.
And I know that's just the way of things, but it's
Yeah.
still like something that I lacked choice in. And also the
Mm,
freedom to wear clothes without feeling without like caring about how I'm viewed in them, because I would feel as though when I identified as a man, I would say when I identified as a man, because that was I identified at it opposed to being one. So when
yeah.
I identified as a man, like wearing like cuter clothes or like skirts or dresses was like frowned upon by, a lot of other men or even women in some cases. And
Mm,
that didn't like feel good to be like viewed in that way. And
mm,
after being like non-binary, it made me just feel like I was free to not fit in like one of the two boxes that the world kind of gave me to fit in, which would be men and women.
mm, mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's very like a freeing experience for me.
Awesome. I love that. And how did you realize you were non-binary?
Yeah, it was definitely a long kind of journey, and it kind of happened very suddenly, like how I
Right.
realized, because I only realized I was non-binary last year, so 2020. Everyone had a lot of time to themselves, a lot of
Yeah.
self-reflecting. Yeah, so I would say last year, what happened was I was getting a lot more into like politics, because I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
ever into it.
Yeah.
And so I started getting into politics. And since I was getting into politics, I was learning more about the LGBTQ plus community in the process, because that's kind of part
Mm-hmm.
of politics.
Yeah.
And yeah, and non-binary, like as a term, I didn't even know. Like, I only really knew just men, women, cis, and trans. That was pretty much the only things I knew. Like, I knew about
Mm-hmm.
like, I knew about like queer people, and I definitely knew about like all of that, but not like gender too much.
Mm-hmm.
So with pretty much all my free time, I was just getting more into politics and the LGBTQ plus community, and I made friends with this amazing woman who like taught me a lot about her experience with the LGBTQ plus community and the struggles
Mm-hmm.
that they face, and the struggles that the trans community face and all of that, and it just got me more really sympathetic with the cause and wanting to learn like a lot more about it.
Mm.
So yeah. So at first it was really like a means of knowledge and just understanding the community as a whole. But then like once I understood it, it made me want to like implement what I learned about gender and sexuality like onto myself, which I never really did before because I always was like, I'm just a cis straight man, like at least in 2020. That's just how I thought
Mm.
of myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at first I still felt like just a cis straight man, even with all of the knowledge I knew about it. And I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, I'm fine with that. Um, but there was there was like a few key moments that would really define like what made me realize it. And
Mhm.
firstly was me taking up the stance that clothes have no gender, so anyone should feel free to
Mm.
wear whatever they want and not be defined by their clothes in association to their gender,
Mm.
because it is just clothes, like it's like a piece of cloth, it's
Yeah.
kind of, but there's only like gender associated to it because of the social constructs of like what, like who should wear what, pretty much.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And at first I like wanted, because I've always wanted to wear like cuter clothes, just because that's just how, like my entire upbringing, I've always wanted to wear cuter clothes, but I
Mhm.
just felt afraid to do it because I was a man and I was taught that, men aren't supposed to look this certain way and they're not supposed to
Mm.
dress this certain way. It makes them less manly, in air quotes here. Makes them less manly.
Yeah.
Um, but I was like, I was like, whatever, I'll just do it anyways. So I bought a skirt, like my first skirt and leggings I bought in 2020,
Mhm.
and I put them on, and like it's like hard to like explain, but it was like, it just felt like an ocean of like euphoria
Wow.
just go over me. And at that time I didn't even understand what gender euphoria was, but it just like looking in the mirror
Mm.
and seeing the way I looked was like, I felt like I always wanted to look this way, like all the time. And it
Oh.
was like such a good feeling.
Yay.
And yeah, but like at that moment though, I still wasn't really convinced that I was
Mm.
gonna, go with it. I was still like, I'll just dress this way and still identify as a man. I just want to be like a cute man. Like that's what I wanted to be. Like
Oh.
a soft boy, if you will. I wanted to be like
Oh.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm totally fine with, and I'm totally fine with anyone being that. But
Mhm. Mhm.
as I like stood there and reflected more and like how I looked in the mirror, I felt like I felt the stress and fear of what, other men would think of me or what women would think of me. Like I really did like stress about it. Like, oh, are they going to think of me as less of a man because I wear this
Mm.
stuff? Or are
Mhm.
women going to view me as like, not appealing because I'm not like man enough for them, like stuff like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it got to a point where I just like shut that away and I like didn't want to wear, like I stopped trying to like wear stuff again, and I was like just wearing like, jeans and a decal shirt, like normal stuff, like normal guy stuff.
Mm.
And it took me a while to like get back out of that comfort zone, but what really got me out was researching more about being non-binary and like what that all entailed. And for me to be able to like, for me at least, like it felt like I was able to kind of reject both sides, like reject both boxes that I've been given and kind of choose
Mhm.
my own path and not care what either side would think of me, because they're probably wrong anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I am still male passing, and that's fine because that's how the world views me, but that's
Mm.
not how I view me and that's not who I am. So they're just
Mm.
wrong. And if they want to get to know me, then they can. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
totally. Yeah.
And what really like set me off into my non-binary upbringing was just starting by going by they them. Like I just was like,
Mhm.
I think I'm non-binary and I think I want to go by they them. So I asked my friends and my family at the time if they could just call me that and see if I'm
Mhm.
comfortable with it. And like it really just felt like better and more like comfy over like the months. Like it just felt more like I felt more whole about it. I felt more like comfy with it. And eventually, like I started looking in the mirror and not viewing myself in any gender. I just kind of viewed myself as, because I
Mm.
kind of see non-binary as just absence of gender, even though non-binary is a gender. I kind
Hmm.
of just view it as like an absence of, because I'm kind of
Yeah.
just human. So that's kind of what I'm
Yeah,
going
yeah.
with. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting because when you just said agender, you mean like agenda,
Yeah, yeah, not a
not
gender.
not agender. Because yeah, so
Yeah.
agender. How do you feel about the term agender then?
I actually don't really understand agender that much, but that's because I've
Okay,
never researched it. So
okay.
I hear it bouncing around. Oh wait, no, isn't agender yeah,
Like yeah,
agender,
agender
yeah.
as yeah, as far as I understand it, it's just like the absence of gender or not relating
Yeah,
to
yeah,
gender at
yeah.
all.
Yeah, yeah. I would say,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely relate to that a lot. I just sense I like
Hmm.
when I learn new terms like that, I like to really look into them before I like
Totally.
wholeheartedly say that I
Totally.
am this or that I
Yeah.
relate to that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
with agender, I just learned about that from,
Mm.
your last episodes. So I
Oh
didn't really,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't really understand it at first, but
Mm.
I get it, and I definitely think I would identify with it if I knew more about it.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, and
Interesting. Yeah.
the journey's been going strong since like December, because December was when I officially, like December of last year was when I officially came out like publicly as being non-binary and
Mm-hmm.
started making those non-binary posts on you should probably know more about trans people, the Facebook group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when I really started to get into it and like understand it. And that group itself really helped me understand it more by seeing so many different people's perspective and like their own gender experience
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love the group as well. It's just so, and I love the feature days that they've got, like the non-binary
Oh,
Wednesday
yeah.
and stuff.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the
That's
featured
really
days are
lovely.
really good. Gives people
Yeah.
the representation they deserve.
Absolutely. Yeah. So where does the label transgender fit in? Was that like after the
Yes,
non-binary realization or before?
it was definitely way after. And this is
Ah.
actually a kind of new development because I always knew that non-binary was under the umbrella of transgender, because transgender just means that you are a gender that you were not born as. You're like,
Mm,
cis person is, they're born male, they are male. Cis person, someone who's trans, they're
mm,
born one gender, they are a different gender. So
mm,
for me, since I, is assigned male at birth and I am non-binary, so I'm transgender in that sense, but I
mm-hmm,
never like considered myself transgender for a while just because I had a loose understanding of what transgender really meant.
mm-hmm,
And I thought that you'd have to be transgender, you had to be you had to have a you had to be male or female. You had to be like, yeah, you had to be a man or a woman in pretty
mm,
much. Like that's what I thought.
mm-hmm,
But I, looking further into it, realized that, just if you just are a different gender than you were born as, then you're transgender. And some
mm,
people don't want to go by transgender, even if they are like, even if they fit under those categories. And
mm-hmm,
that's totally fine. It's really up to the individual. I
totally.
just like repping it because I definitely feel like it's true to me.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm not like fearful at all for being transgender and being outwardly transgender to anyone, because I want to spread that awareness, that we
mm-hmm,
exist, like we're not
yeah.
going anywhere. We exist. We're just like you. We're human as well. We
Mm-hmm,
just have, there's really nothing different about us other than just how we feel opposed to how a cis person would feel. Like we just
mm,
feel differently towards ourselves. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So how do you feel then about masculinity and femininity? What do they mean to you?
Oh, masculine and feminine are an interesting conversation. Like, I
Mm,
understand that these terms have been established and used as a classification for so long, but I
mm,
kind of dislike them a little bit. Like, I dislike them because it's kind of the same boat of, man and woman, where it's like there's only these two main boxes that you're putting
mm,
people in, and you're putting all of these traits in like these two boxes
mm-hmm,
when a lot of people share both, like they share traits with both sides. They share traits with masculinity and femininity. So
mm,
it's like you don't necessarily need to split them up into two separate groups and then be like, oh, well, this is masculine and this is feminine, because what's masculine and feminine, I think, could be open to interpretation and could
Totally.
change
Mm-hmm.
dependent on, the person, dependent on the society you're around.
Totally.
Because there's a lot of different cultures where masculinity is different than it would
Mm-hmm.
be in like the United States, or where it would be in the UK, or like
Yeah.
anything like that. Same with femininity. And it's pretty much just like, these personality traits, they're personality traits of humans. And like
Totally.
separating the personality traits just make it so that there's just these things to pick apart about people more, when there doesn't really need to be, because it's just making things kind of overly complicated,
Mm.
when it could be more simplistic so that everyone else could understand. And there's also this association that masculinity is always, considered with like a man, or femininity is considered with
Mm-hmm.
a woman, which it isn't in a lot of cases, because there's a lot of, women that have a lot of masculine qualities. There's a lot of, men that have feminine qualities, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't make them any less of a man or any less of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Or for me, being non-binary, I have a lot of masculine and feminine qualities,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't make me any less non-binary. It doesn't make me any more of a man, doesn't make me any more of a woman. I'm still like just as non-binary as I always have been. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like an odd thing, but I understand why people want to go by it, because sometimes like feeling strongly about your masculinity or femininity could give you a sense of euphoria and make you feel like you're getting closer to like feeling whole in a sense.
Mm.
So like I could understand it to an extent. I feel like if it goes like over that, you're being overly masculine or you're being overly feminine to like a toxic level, then it gets
Mm-hmm.
kind of dangerous for not only you, but the people around you that you are implementing that femininity or masculinity on.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Ooh. Just processing. My brain is processing.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time. Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I really only thought of it like recently, because I never really
Uh-huh.
thought about the topic too in depth,
Mm-hmm.
because I never really associated with masculine or feminine
Mm-hmm.
for like
Mm-hmm.
not really at all. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to talk about it, because
Totally.
I I was even kind of confused on how I felt about it, because I
Yeah.
even yeah, even when I identified as a man, I always disliked when people would bring up my masculinity or femininity. I was like, that has nothing to
Mm.
do with who I am as a person.
Yeah.
Like yeah, I am who I am. I express myself how I want. It doesn't have to be masculine and feminine. It's just me expressing myself.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's a good thing to question anyway, like for anyone,
Yeah.
to be fair. Yeah. And
Yeah,
what that really
100%.
means to people,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So why do you feel gender expression is important?
I feel gender expression it is definitely important, and it definitely can come in like so many different shapes and sizes, and very unique to the individual. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the most unique things that people have and they don't even realize,
Mm.
because this could be how you dress, it could be how you talk, it could be how you present yourself like as a whole, or even how you think. Like it doesn't have to be
Mm.
an outward expression, it could be an inward expression.
Mm.
And it's really like it really helps you understand how you personally view yourself and view your gender. And by expressing that, it helps you kind of feel more comfortable in the gender that you are. Like for
Mm.
me, I express myself through how I dress and how I think and how I hold myself. Like all of those things I would consider I do like as a non-binary person.
Mm.
But I wouldn't say that I dress like a non-binary person, or that I think like a non-binary person. I would just say that I think and dress in a way that makes me feel more non-binary. It's kind of
Mm.
a confusing thing, because I don't think one non-binary person is a representation of what all non-binary people would look like.
Totally.
The
Yeah.
same with, not all men are the same, and not all women are the same.
Mm.
Yeah, they all express
Mm-hmm.
themselves and they express their gender very differently, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I think a lot of the time, maybe people expect a non binary person to present or express themselves in a more androgynous way.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that's very much an expectation, isn't it?
It is, it is.
Yeah.
And it's an expectation that isn't inherently true to all non-binary people. I
Mm.
mean, it's the same as like how people like, oh, you know, you're a woman, you should be dressing a certain way. When it's like there is no one way that she should be dressing. She should
Mm-hmm.
dress however she feels comfortable.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so and it's
Mm.
also like not like gender expression isn't also about how other people are viewing you. I would say gender expression is more important to how you're viewing yourself and what
Mm.
you're doing to help you further like understand and express your gender like to yourself.
Mm.
So, yeah. And for me it's really just, you know, dressing up and like
Mm.
how I walk, how I talk, like that's just I consider it
Yeah.
all very me and very, I wouldn't say it's very non-binary. I would just say it's just very me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting one, actually, about gender expression being for yourself as opposed to for other people. Because I have heard people say that they maybe express themselves in a particular way so that other people will perceive them more like the way they are or more accurately,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know?
yeah, that's true too. That's 100% true. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely feel like that plays a huge part as well. Like if you, you know,
Mm.
if you look in a sense, if you know, you look the part that you feel inside, then it definitely helps you connect more with that gender that you are. And it helps other people
Yeah.
around you see that gender for what you are. So
Mm.
I would say that me dressing up is mostly for me, but if people view me a different way because I dress a certain way, then that also feels good. Like it feels good when people look at me on the street and like they don't really necessarily know what I am. Like I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that uncertainty in them because that's kind of what I want to convey. I want to convey to them that they should be questioning something, that it's not
Mm.
just two genders and that they should be more aware of their surroundings and more aware of the people in their surroundings because
Mm.
I definitely think a little bit of awareness could go a long way to the right person.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. We need to all be questioning stuff like that. It's an
Yeah.
interesting one though, like you say, because someone might be expressing a particular way, and
Mhm.
even someone who isn't necessarily non-binary could just be expressing themselves in an androgynous way. And
Exactly.
people might be
Exactly.
like, oh, just wondering about gender and stuff, or just find it interesting, or be confused, which
Yeah,
is, yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You could present almost any way and be any gender. And, you know,
Yep.
if people want to question that, then that's kind of like up to them to learn, you know. It's
Mm-hmm.
not up
Yeah.
to the person that's dressing a certain way to explain, you know, to every single person that's questioning them, like why they dress a certain way or why they
Yeah,
hold
totally.
themselves a certain way. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's kind of how it was for me. Like I was really oblivious to all of it when I first started learning about it, but that's because it was all I was ever taught. I mean, all I was ever
Mm-hmm.
taught was that there was just two genders and
Yeah.
that if you're a boy, you dress this way, you're a girl, you dress this way. That was kind of just it. But yeah, I was just sheltered for so long. And I definitely think a lot of people are still really sheltered to just what they have learned. And
Mm.
so just by being myself and being outwardly myself, I hope that I could just spread some awareness just by people
Mm.
looking at me.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So tell me a little bit about your cultural background, and
Oh,
how
my
how does it
cultural.
yeah, and how does that deal with your with gender, I suppose.
Yeah, so my cultural background actually isn't really that diverse, surprisingly.
Right.
I am Spanish and I am Mexican and I am Japanese and Welsh. Those are the races I have in
Wow.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm not super close to like any of them, surprisingly. I was kind of
Right.
raised really neutrally. Like my parents were kind of like, you know, step away parents, very not like there a lot. So it made it so I kind of just had to formulate my own opinions on a lot of things.
Mm.
And one of those things was my culture because my parents didn't really like my parents' parents had culture. Like My grandparents on my father's side were, they spoke Spanish. They were from Mexico, and
Mm-hmm.
they definitely had a lot more culture. They made like, Mexican food, Spanish rice and beans and enchiladas, all that stuff.
Mm.
But they didn't really want to pass that down to their kids. Like they wanted their kids to speak good English. So
Mm.
my dad was very like Americanized in a sense and didn't really understand much of his culture. So I was
Right.
raised in that census, but also he gave me like he didn't have any restrictions. Like I wasn't religious either,
Mm.
and my mother was she was Asian American, so she was Japanese and Welsh,
Mm.
and her culture wasn't really given to her either because her grandparents want my grandparents wanted the same thing for her where they wanted her to speak good English.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
like I was pretty absent actually of culture, and I'm still trying to like get more into my own culture. And when it
Mm.
comes to like gender, I feel like my on my father's side, my grandparents have passed already on that side,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely feel as though they wouldn't really understand it that well because Spanish is a lot of their language is very male and female oriented.
Yeah.
Yeah, like like senor, senorita, like stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it'd be a little hard for them. And
Mm-hmm.
my other grandparents on my mother's side that are still around, I feel like they'd be more open to it, but I have not brought it up to them yet. So
Yeah.
I honestly don't know yet, but I hopefully think they'd be okay with it.
Mm.
I'm probably going to talk to them about this podcast. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind
Yeah.
of how I'm going to come out as it to them.
Yeah.
So,
It's
we
like
will
surprise.
see.
Yeah. Listen.
Yeah.
Listen to this. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully they can understand me a little bit better. But yeah, I'll
Yeah.
definitely be open to it.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel particularly drawn to any of your heritage or anything? Because obviously, you, as you mentioned, you kind of missed out on it, I suppose, in your
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your
I would
growing
say
up.
I'm definitely more drawn to the Japanese part of me, like
Mm.
way more. And that's
Yeah.
mostly because I grew up like watching animes and watching like Japanese content.
Mm-hmm.
So it really got me more familiar with like the language and more familiar with like what their culture is like. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm way more interested in that. And since my grandma is still around, I would like to get more into that culture. So maybe I could talk to her a little bit about it because she is
Mm-hmm.
from Japan. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it would be interesting. And
Mm.
but she speaks really good English. She just has like a really heavy accent, and she's she's a little small old lady, but she's like
Oh.
really, yeah, she's really
Yeah.
cute. She's like, I don't know how tall she is. She's definitely like smaller than 5 foot. Like she's definitely like,
uh,
yeah, she's great
yeah.
though.
Awesome. I mean, I visited Japan some years ago. Really loved
Oh,
it, and
yeah, I'm
it's
I'm really hyped to visit. Yeah.
yeah. Have you
And
not visited before?
I have not visited. I've
Mm.
barely been outside of actually I've never been outside of California. So
Okay.
that's gonna be fun for me.
Yeah.
My grandparents were telling me about it because they have obviously been to Japan. That's where they met, and they were telling me that even if I don't speak the language, that there are ways and applications that I can like I could go over there and have an application on my phone to make it so I could talk in
Yeah.
like English and it'll translate it to Japanese and vice versa. So I
Yeah.
could communicate with people there without knowing the language, which that was a huge thing for me because I was really like thinking that I didn't want to go there until I at least understood the language a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is nice to know some basics, isn't it?
Oh
And
yeah, definitely. I would
yeah.
love to know some basics just in case I don't have my phone on me.
Yeah, I really love the Japanese language. And I feel like it's very, like the language and culture are so tightly knit together, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
It's
how I just
fascinating.
love how beautiful the language is. I love it.
Mm.
I listen to a lot of Japanese music as well. So
Ah,
and
wow.
since I do want to be a singer eventually, that's really the
Mm.
main reason why I wanted to learn Japanese is so I could be able to sing Japanese music.
Awesome. Well, you probably picked up more than you know, like
Yeah,
if you're
I bet if
surrounded by it all
yeah,
the time, you
I
know?
bet if I definitely started learning it, I would pick up a lot of stuff like, oh, I know that word,
Yeah.
or oh, I know that.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, you also mentioned you gave me some other labels to use in your episode title. So you're pansexual and panromantic. So
Yeah.
what does that mean to you?
Okay, so for me, pansexual definitely just means that I am sexually attracted to anyone regardless of their gender. It really comes down to the person, like who they are. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really find much sexual attraction to a person that I don't think is like a good person, usually. And even if I do, I wouldn't find myself ever really wanting to do anything with them, you know. And when it comes to panromantic, I find a romantic attraction to people that I'm more familiar with, and that is also regardless of gender. They could be any gender, and as
Mm-hmm.
long as I find them someone that I would call like my people, I use that in quotations,
Mm.
someone that's like my
Yeah.
people, then I definitely would be interested in having a romantic relationship with them.
Mm.
I Since I've gone by these labels, I have not been in any relationships, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like not being in a relationship made me kind of understand how I felt about it more. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I find it interesting how you kind of separate the two. Like there's the sexual attraction, romantic attraction, because
Yeah.
there's so many
Yeah.
different types, you know, and
Yeah,
it's
because
yeah.
yeah, because I definitely have sexual attraction to people that I do not want to be in a relationship with.
Mm.
And there's definitely a lot of people that I've met that I would want to be in a relationship with, but don't really find that attractive. So I would
Mm.
initially want to find someone that I kind of feel both with.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself like maybe polyamorous? I don't know. Is that something that appeals to you? Would you be open to? Because the thing is, in society, right? It's all about yes,
Hmm.
the relationship, capital
Yeah,
T,
yeah.
capital R. You know, it
Uh-huh.
has to tick all these boxes, and if it doesn't, then it's basically not good enough, and anything else is secondary. You know, there's all the stuff we get conditioned with.
Hmm.
So I personally feel like what there's nothing wrong with having all these different relationships with different people and not necessarily having a hierarchy there,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
also not one not excluding another, because just because you got this type of relationship, all of a sudden everything else cannot be like that, you know, or it's not allowed to be maybe as intimate, or you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel like in polyamory, like I have nothing wrong with it at all.
Mm-hmm.
In polyamory, it's really helpful to have multiple partners that can, fit different boxes,
Mm.
things that you would need that another partner would lack. You could have
Mm.
a partner that would have, A, B, and C, and then another partner that has like D, E, and F. So
Mm. Mm-hmm.
it's really helpful because you as an individual is getting what you want and you like would like in a relationship, and you don't have to just have it from one singular source, because it's not like
Mm-hmm.
one person is always going to have A through F, like.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's really interesting, and I would
Mm-hmm.
definitely be open to it if I found the right people. But I think
Mm-hmm.
I would be better. I would be better finding two people that would want to have me involved in it, opposed to me finding like one person and another one person. Like that would be pretty difficult for me because I
Mm.
am not the most sociable, and I am a little bit of a like a social outcast in a sense. And I'm fine with that. That's
Mm.
just kind of how I am. So that's why it'd be easier for me to envelop into a relationship that has already been made and has foundation.
Mm.
And for me, I personally I would want to look for just one person, and I would want to be with one person,
Mm-hmm.
just because I still haven't really experienced just dating one person since I have identified and been all of the things I am as of now.
Mm.
Since I've understood, my mental health more, since I've understood my gender more, since I've understood like my sexuality, like all of those things were not
Mm.
existent when I was in my last relationship. So,
Yeah, so you're very
yeah.
much a new person, bringing
Yeah,
who you
yeah.
are now to like a new type of relationship, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So I have
I
no
see.
idea how I would interact yet in one of those. So
Mm. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's it would be easier to contain it to one person, at least the first time I start
Yeah,
one.
that's fair. Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned mental health as well.
Yeah.
What is that like for you?
I would say for me, I'm gonna preface this at the beginning with saying that I definitely think I need therapy, and I definitely think that a lot of people need therapy, even if they don't think they need
Totally. I
therapy,
think, to be
because
honest, everyone needs therapy.
everyone
Everyone needs
does.
therapy.
Everyone needs someone to talk to and unload on without, without feeling like they're like burdening their friends or burdening their family
Yep.
with it or something. Like
Hmm.
having a therapist there is very helpful. Sometimes it may be
Totally.
hard to find like one that you could trust, but it's still worth trying to find one.
Hmm.
And I'm still looking for one currently, but
Hmm.
I'm gonna say that from what I know about myself, I could firmly say that I'm not diagnosed with these things, but I could firmly say that I have imposter syndrome, ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Like firmly, I could say that I have these
Hmm.
things,
Hmm.
and they all affect me. I wouldn't say they all affect me daily. I would say ADHD, depression, and anxiety definitely affect me daily. And imposter syndrome is kind of dependent on all of the other ones.
Mm.
Um,
Okay. How does that show
yeah.
up?
For ADHD, it's definitely my hyperactiveness. It's definitely
Hmm.
my need to change tasks constantly. Like it's hard for me to stay on one task. Like
Hmm.
if I have like an overarching goal with this one task, then I'm probably doing a bunch of different little side goals in
Hmm.
between. And then I get distracted from the main goal. And by the time I go back to the main goal, it's like I totally forgotten what it was.
Yeah.
So with my anxiety, it comes in a form of social anxiety and just
Hmm.
like a more broader term of it, which is like my jitteriness, my need to always be like kind of like doing something with my hands, kind of. And
Mm.
in social bubbles, it's definitely like it's like a turning in my stomach, kind of. I always want to look at the floor. It's hard for me to make eye contact.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's stuff like that. And
Hmm.
with my depression, it's more so like waking up with like a flat feeling like nothing is necessarily like good or bad. I kind of just feel like everything's flat. It
Mm.
used to be just like bad. It used to just feel bad, but I've had depression for so long that at this point it just feels like things are kind of flat. Like nothing's good
Mm.
or bad, just my day is kind of meh.
Mm.
um
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like when all of those are like active at once, it's like really hard to like concentrate on anything. So I usually drown out like I drown out my thoughts usually with like music or like a game or like a TV
Mm.
show, like something like that. Like if my brain is just jittery and thinking about too many things.
Yeah, that sounds quite overwhelming. Like when you say
Yeah.
all the things are active
Yeah, all
at
the
one
things.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like sometimes it's just two of them, sometimes it's just one of them, I
Mm.
would say lately it's just been my like ADHD and my anxiety here and there. Like it pops in here and there.
Hmm.
Um
Hmm.
and imposter syndrome really pops in when I'm feeling like inadequate in things that I'm doing. Like imposter
Hmm.
syndrome essentially is just, it's kind of just it's self-descriptive. It's feeling like an imposter. It feels like you're it feels like you don't feel like you fit in with the people around you or the things around you. Like
Hmm.
for instance, if I am doing a task that requires, a certain amount of skill and I feel like I'm not doing it like the best, like I'm doing it to the best of my ability, but I'm not doing it
Mm.
like the best, I'll feel like I'm inadequate. I'll feel like I'm not competent. I feel like I'm not
Mm.
good enough. And that's really where that imposter syndrome comes in.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and that happens with a lot of aspects. Like if I'm in a
Yeah.
social environment and I'm talking to people and like they're not talking to me back or like they're not
Mm.
giving me the same attention I'm giving them, then I definitely feel like, who am I? Like, am I like
Yeah.
am I feeling like that I'm equal in this? So then I start feeling like, well, am I acting normal? Am I acting like human? So it's like,
Mm.
it's questioning myself and making myself like kind of the outcast, like all the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Hmm.
it does.
I actually figured that out from a song called Imposter Syndrome, like
Oh,
by Sydney Gish.
oh, I've not heard it. I will look it up.
Yeah, it's good. It's indie. It's an indie song. So
Cool. I like indie.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fun.
yeah. It's Two Door Cinema Club, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also heard that in one of your episodes.
Yeah, yeah. That is so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sydney Guest's really good. The song really spoke to me because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for one, it was talking about imposter syndrome, and it was talking about it from the perspective of someone who has imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, listening to it and relating to it, I was like, oh, wow, I really relate to this. And
Mm. Yeah.
funny enough, even my name was in the song. And at that time,
Really?
yeah, Victor's in the song. And I
That's so
never heard
cool.
my name in like any song before that. So it was really interesting to me.
Wow. Nice
Yeah.
synchronicity. Yeah.
Yeah, nice
Yeah.
synchronicity.
So, do you feel in your self discovery journey, how do
Mhm.
you feel your mental health and maybe your gender are connected when it comes to your identity? Do you see a connection there?
I definitely see a connection there. I definitely think I was way more depressed when I was like unsure of who I was. And
Mm-hmm.
I was unsure of who I was unknowingly. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
unknowingly always felt like I never fit in, always felt like even my own perceptions of how I thought I would fit in, like they didn't match. Like I
Mm.
never really fit in with any of the men in my life because they were just very like I guess stereotypical men's men, like what they have been taught from other men. Like that's the kind
Mm-hmm.
of men they were. And
Yeah.
I never really identified with that. I never really felt like like belonged. And then when it came to women, I never felt I belonged with them either because
Mm.
like I was a man and I always had this self-awareness of like women may be intimidated just by me being a man because like men can be unpredictable and be
Mm.
scary in senses and intimidating to women because men are always berating women and it's a man's world and like men have more
Mm.
power over women and more dominion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like I always like felt uncomfortable even talking to girls because I would just feel like I was like making them feel unsafe.
Mm.
So it definitely made my imposter syndrome feel way stronger. And I, of course, didn't even understand it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say just understanding my mental health was a huge thing. And what made me understand my mental health way more was understanding my gender. Like I got really
Mm.
into learning about my gender more. Like I always knew I had depression, but when I got into learning about my gender more, a lot of people, of different diversing genders and a lot of the transgender community as well has a lot of mental health problems and they talk about it because they want to spread awareness about it. And like
Mm-hmm.
in my life, a lot of stereotypical cis people don't really talk about mental health like at all. Like it's
Mm.
not something that's talked about. It's like, oh, you feeling depressed, then you're just weak, or like,
Mm.
oh, you're feeling this certain way, well just man up, get better. And it's like
Yeah.
that's not how mental health works. You can't just
Mm.
get better. You have to first understand, your mind a little bit. You have to understand why your mind is working the way it does and see if you can like I guess
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like it's more so like just pointing out what the issue is and then seeing if you could try to mend that. And that's definitely
Mm.
why therapy is very helpful when it comes to mental issues because
Mm.
you could bounce how you feel off of a person who is trained to know a lot about mental health and a lot about these
Yeah.
different they're able to give you different diagnoses that like people need just feel like they understand themselves. Just
Totally.
understanding it is like a huge thing. Like just me
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, yeah,
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like you say, when you encounter someone who's depressed, just telling them to, man up or get over it. It's like you won't tell anyone with a broken leg to just get up and get
yeah,
over it, would
yeah,
you?
a
Like,
hundred,
why?
yeah, yeah. It's the
uh,
same thing. It's an
yeah.
illness. It's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same thing. It's just affects you mentally. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, that was told to me like most of my life. So I always had a sense of feeling like, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm just not like strong enough, I guess. And that didn't make my
Mm.
depression any better. It made it worse. It made it way worse
Yeah.
for someone else. Like when you have someone else's opinion telling you something that you think you understand and they want to give you a different perspective on it, thinking they're helping you and
Mm.
they're really not, it makes you think, oh, this person is trying to help me and I'm just not strong enough or I just don't get it. And
Yeah.
and it's like makes you self-attack yourself. And it's like even if they don't know what they're doing, it's like them not knowing what they're doing is making your problems so much worse. And that's why, like,
Yeah, people should just not
yeah.
really say anything then,
Yeah,
shouldn't they?
yeah.
It's
If
like,
you don't understand, just don't say
yeah,
anything
it's
about it.
like, oh, you're
Yeah.
depressed. Have you tried not being depressed? Well,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like,
thanks,
oh
you're a
yeah.
genius. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I never thought about that. Never thought of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. God.
Yeah, it's the same with like my ADHD. If I'm just like overthinking and I am like just spouting all of, because with ADHD I definitely tend to have like think out loud. Like a
Mm,
lot of people with ADHD definitely think out loud, which means that they say a lot of things that they're thinking, because we have our
mhm,
inside selves and we have your outside selves. And
mhm,
with an ADHD person, that inside self and outside self could just flip on and off. So
mm,
they could share a lot of thoughts or things about themselves that like someone wouldn't necessarily do, and maybe they're not even necessarily comfortable with. But once it's out there, it's kind of too late. And
mm,
it really helps to have like a comfort group to like just validate your thoughts and
mhm,
bounce your thoughts back to you and be like, hey, well, why do you feel this way about this thing, or like this or
mm,
that, or do you necessarily agree with the things you just said? Because I say a lot of things that I don't
mm,
necessarily agree with in the moment, because it's like the first time I ever thought about it, but I'm outwardly thinking about it, so I'm like saying it and I'm talking about it.
mm.
And for some people, they want to pick fights and like, oh, so this is how you feel about it, let's have an argument. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily how I feel about it, I'm just voicing my thoughts right now.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, so it's really helpful to have someone who understands that just because you say something does not mean you feel that way about it. And it's the
Yeah.
same as thinking about something. Just because you
Mm.
think something doesn't mean you feel that way about it.
Totally. Don't believe everything you think, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of it is like when I'm overthinking, I have to pick out like different thoughts and be like, no, I don't think I agree with this, or like, yes, I may agree with this, but I would never say it out loud. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows like how bad we are at communicating.
Yeah, we
Really, really.
we are. I would say we're pretty bad at communicating because of just how we are taught about mental
Totally.
health, which is like
Yeah.
almost nothing. Like in
Mhm.
school, there was never a mention about mental health like ever. And
Yeah.
I didn't even know in school the entire time I was in it, because I was really, really bad at school, because I had really bad
Mm.
ADHD and depression and anxiety. I
Mhm.
had that throughout my entire childhood. So like if a teacher's talking and I start trailing off and thinking my own thoughts, then nothing's
Mm.
keeping my attention. Like no one was aware that my attention was even trailing, because it wasn't
Yeah.
a talked about subject. Nobody like knew really what ADHD entailed, or nobody knew what
Mm.
depression or anxiety entailed, at least as a kid especially.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, having talked to Jin actually about neurodiversity on being neurodivergent, it's really
Mhm.
interesting even how I feel like mental health, it's all such a spectrum, isn't it? Because
Oh
even
yeah, it's
even
yeah.
in hindsight, I feel like I can look back and think I've even now when I'm on a phone call with someone, this is different actually for some reason having this
Mhm.
conversation with you because we haven't
Yeah,
got video on, it's just audio. But like
yeah.
I know when I'm on a phone call with someone just making small talk, like just chatting away, I feel like I
Mhm.
have to do something. Otherwise, if I don't do
Oh
anything and just
yeah.
sit there, I feel like I can't, like my thoughts wander and I don't hear it very well,
Oh
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
just
It's
get
hard to pay
distracted.
attention. Yeah.
Oh,
You
yeah,
need like a fidget, you need to
yeah,
like walk or something. I
yeah,
always walk. I always
yeah,
walk on the phone, and it helps me keep my attention.
yeah,
Or I'm like
yeah,
fidgeting with my legs or fidgeting with my nails,
yeah.
like something. I
I do
need
some
something.
origami, so that helps
Oh,
maybe.
origami, like on the
Yeah.
phone? Wow. That's really interesting. I definitely do origami too. I just haven't picked it up in so long.
Yeah, I love it. It's
I
really good.
start I definitely started it because of my just my love for folding paper. Just it feels,
Yeah,
so I used to make paper airplanes a lot, and then I just was like,
nice.
well, let's up this. Let's
Yeah,
up
let's
the
take it to the
antes.
next level. Yeah.
Yeah. But I stopped doing it because it's like and like when you get into the real complicated stuff of origami, you have to make
Wow.
every movement like so precise. And it's
Yeah.
like that's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. It suits me because I'm that kind of person.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to redo it, because I feel like I have a new sense of like feeling like more competent in it now. Feel a little bit
Yeah,
more confident
totally.
in my abilities. Yeah.
Yeah, get
That's
yourself some
also,
nice
yeah.
origami paper as
Oh,
well.
I
Treat
have a
yourself.
lot. I
Do
have a
you?
lot. Yeah, I have a lot of
Nice.
nice ones. I have a lot of colorful ones. I got
Yeah.
shiny ones. Yeah,
Oh,
it's great.
lovely.
Yeah.
Origami paper is just, oh, it's so lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like gender, just all these different colors and beautiful things, and they're all so
Ah,
complicated.
absolutely.
Everyone's
Yeah,
unique.
totally. Oh, wow.
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
also want to bring up a little bit about like when it comes to like gender and clothes a little bit, like
Hmm. Hmm.
fashion and clothes. Yeah, where
Yeah.
it's like people definitely like have this like standard in their brain because of what they've been taught that, you know, people just wear a certain thing based on their gender. Like,
Hmm.
like and people like if you identify as a man, you'd feel weird about wearing a dress in public because of how
Mm.
like other men would view you. Same with like a woman wearing like cargo shorts and like a tank top, maybe like something like
Mm.
that, where it doesn't like need to be there if people just didn't see gender in clothes at all. Like,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
gender in clothes is again just like a societal construct that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Because if it wasn't there,
Totally.
then like anyone would just wear anything, and it would make it so
Totally.
much easier to just not even question someone's gender at all based
Mm.
on their appearance, because it's really just
Yeah.
based on your appearance. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because like people
Yeah.
will look at a certain person and be like, oh, they're this or that, or I think they're this or that because of what they're wearing or what they're presenting. But if that wasn't there, then you wouldn't even have that thought. You wouldn't have the thought of like, oh, this person might be this because of the way they're dressing. Because like anyone,
Totally.
everything's fair game for anyone. So
Mm. Yeah,
yeah,
that's how it should be, because that's again where the masculine and feminine comes in.
yeah,
If
yeah,
someone is like very like a woman wearing very feminine clothes, like there's
hmm,
like degrees of femininity and all the,
exactly, exactly.
and people jump to conclusions and make assumptions
Hmm.
about that person based on their looks. Like, yeah, it just happens so automatically, doesn't it? And we all do it because we're all
Yeah,
conditioned
yeah.
that way. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's really like ingrained in us.
Mm-hmm.
It's been for so long. Like I know I do it too, and I don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
want to do it because like I know that I know I
Yeah.
can't just assume that about somebody just based on how they look.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah.
It's good to be aware of that and just question
Oh
it in
yeah.
yourself.
It's
Like,
oh
yeah.
100%, 100%. I even question it when I wear something. I'm just like, oh yeah, I look very this way right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing for sure.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you have any further questions for me? Anything you want to talk
Well,
about further?
I was just going to ask you actually, is there anything that you'd like to say that we haven't talked about yet? And then
Oh,
you just said about, the fashion and clothes and stuff. I don't know. Is there anything else?
I mean, ah, I don't think off the top of my mind I have
Mm.
anything else. I think I covered
Yeah.
most of what I wanted to talk about.
I think you did. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, in that case, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I really appreciate being on here, and I really appreciate letting me have like a platform to talk about this.
Awesome. Yay. You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Victor, where you can also read the transcript, and you can find Victor on Instagram. The link is on the episode page. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com, on social media, and on YouTube. Again, if you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.
If you're a boy, you dress this way. You're a girl, you dress this way. That was kind of just it, and it didn't. Callie, oh, sorry, my cats. Okay.
Oh, I hear it. Cats are
Yeah.
welcome to join in podcast episodes.
Yeah, she likes talking about non-binary stuff, don't you, Callie? Yeah. Yeah.
So opinionated, aren't they?
Yeah. Yes, they are.